All right, well, welcome everybody. Appreciate you joining me for this second of four classes for Relax, Focus, De-Stress, and Connect. And today's class, we're going to be talking all about focus. And I'm going to do a couple of practices with you and tell you a little bit about attention. That's really what focus is all about. It's about our brain's attention system. And if you think about it, it's might be surprising to know that it's involved in so much of what we do in our daily life. If you're feeling that you're in kind of a cognitive fog, that's depleted attention. If you're feeling anxious or worried or overwhelmed, that's hijacked attention. If you can't seem to focus so that you can take action or dive into urgent work, that's fragmented attention. If you feel out of step and detached from others, that's disconnected attention. So, as I said, today's class is all about our attention system. So, my question right now is, where is your attention? What are you thinking about right now? Where is your mind at? Just turn inward and notice. Maybe it's on the present moment. Maybe you're listening to what I'm saying, but maybe you're also attending to things left over from this morning, so from the past, or maybe you're thinking about things you've got to do later today. That's natural. That's kind of what our minds do. So, and I can ask for your attention. I hope that you give me as best you can, your full attention for this class. But I know your mind is pulling you in lots of different directions, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the things that vie for our attention. So, just right now, just notice, where is your attention? Is it on thoughts? Are there emotions going on? Are there body sensations that are calling out your attention? Last week we talked about relaxing. So hopefully you tried some of those practices last week and tried to learn how to relax the body. And then hopefully the mind follows once we relax ourselves. But it all takes practice. And that's what the 4-week class is about. I hope you're considering joining all 4 classes. But again, if you're not, I am going to post these. I'll show you where at the end, but it's going to be on Thrive. And again, just to remind you, these classes do qualify for the Know Your Numbers credits. They all qualify under the personal choice activities. So once you do the 2 main activities, the biometric screening and then the health assessment, you have a choice of a number of things. But these classes, you can do 2 of these for $100 credits for each class. So keep that in mind. And again, as we go forward, let's use the chat. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to use that, and happy to answer any questions or hear what you're thinking. All right, so going to use a lot of this information is from this book called Peak Mind. And this is by Dr. Amishi Jha. She is a professor of psychology and director of neuroscience at the University of Miami. And she wrote this book a couple of years back. We actually had her as a speaker. And she talks all about finding your focus, owning your attention, and do this in 12 minutes a day. So it's kind of interesting. She leads research on the neural bases of attention and the effects of mindfulness-based training on how that can help our attention. And she works with high-stress groups and occupations like first responders, the military, police officers, and no surprise, healthcare and other business executives. And these are all obviously professions that need us to have our focus, that need us to be able to pay attention, especially under high demand, peak kinds of situations. So we're going to talk a little bit about the flashlight, training the attention using this flashlight image, as well as a spotlight, or I actually am going to call it the floodlight. And then the juggling function and kind of bringing these all together. She came up with a training of 4 weeks, so this is a little bit replicating it, but she does 2 hours a week. And what she found in her research is that the sweet spot, in other words, the most optimal amount of training that you can do is 12 minutes a day. So I'm going to encourage you to do something and maybe work up to that. 12 minutes is hard to carve out of a busy day. But that, according to her research, is where you get the most benefits from doing these trainings, 12 minutes a day. All right, so we'll talk a little bit first about the flashlight image. And attention researchers call this our orienting system. And it's what we use to select information. So think of it as like a flashlight. We're walking down a dark path at night. We have the flashlight in front of us to show our way, but all of a sudden you hear a sound in the bushes behind you. So naturally, we're going to turn around. We're going to shine the flashlight to see what that was. Maybe it's something that is, could harm us, or maybe it's a little bit threatening. So we're going to turn around. That's something that pulls our attention off our path. And we see that nothing is there. Maybe it's just the wind and the rustling through the leaves, or maybe it's a small animal or something like that. So you redirect your attention back to your path. And that's kind of what we're going to be doing in our first exercise today. But in other words, the flashlight shows what we need to focus on. And where we train our flashlight, that shows what's most highlighted. And what's not in the beam, it remains suppressed or dampened or dimmed or blocked out, however we want to point it, phrase it. But now we can point the flashlight beam anywhere. Outward, of course, we do that all day long in our work, but also inward. And that's a lot of what our meditation and our mindful practice is all about, is learning more about what's going on inside. And using that to inform ourselves, to get some insight into best ways to manage what's going on, because there are an awful lot of things that we're dealing with. And that's what this is all really kind of about, is training that focus so that we can use that when we most need it, when we have the most fragmented, the most hectic days, the most demanding days. And we have this capacity to direct that. But some days it feels like the flashlight is being yanked all over the place. So the training is all about learning how to willfully direct that when we most need it, when we need to really focus in on a particular activity. So we're going to do that. We're going to use that image in the first exercise, as I mentioned, but we're also going to talk about simple counting. And when we get to the exercise, you'll see what I mean. We're going to be counting our breaths. So that's one way to kind of stay on task. And then the second is to use what is called mental noting. So we'll say to ourselves, in every time we breathe in, and then out every time we breathe out. Or you can use words like calm and ease as you breathe in and out, or any words that work for you. All right, so we've got a message here in the chat. Somebody is on the meeting, but she can't get on her computer. So I'm not quite sure what that means. Hopefully, the way that this all works is that when you sign up on LMS, which I think most of you have done, you got the link for the Zoom. And so if you know somebody who's having trouble, maybe you can forward them that link. I can't do anything right now myself because I'm right in the middle of controlling all this.
I had to go on to Zoom. Sorry, bud, but I had to go on to Zoom. It wouldn't let me go to LMS. It said it wasn't working.
Yeah, but if you register on LMS, you'd get the Zoom link, but sounds like you obviously got the Zoom link. So
yeah, I did.
Okay. Very good. Excellent. All right, so let's proceed. And so this is our first exercise. We come to this image, which reminds me of sort of like a flashlight at dawn or dusk. So the flashlight practice, you can think of this as sort of like training a puppy. Wandering around is just what puppies do, and our mind does the same thing. But we don't need to be harsh or mean to the puppy when we're training them, right? We want to be consistent and clear with our instruction over and over again. It takes that kind of training. And so same thing with our mind, because there's lots of things vying for our attention. There's lots of pop-ups that happen. in our thoughts and in other things that hijack our attention. So that's what really this is all about. And it's also about being kind to ourselves. So if you find yourself mind wandering, if you find yourself distracted, I think a lot of us do these days. We are handling so much information, much, much, much more than we ever did in previous generations these days. Just think about all the pings and the notifications and the emails and the Teams things and all those various things that are constantly bombarding us and really hijacking our attention. So this first practice is all about how to kind of counteract that. So let's start. This is a pretty brief practice, and we'll just begin by getting ourselves ready. So sitting in an upright position, stable, having an alert posture. You want to be comfortable, though. You want to be able to be relaxed. That's helpful. So thinking about last week, also find a relaxing way to sit, not overly relaxed. Think upright, but not uptight. So sitting up straight and comfortable, shoulders back, chest open so you can breathe easily. A posture that feels natural and kind of embodies a sense of dignified presence. Let your hands rest comfortably on the armrest or on your thighs or in your lap, wherever is comfortable for you. Feet flat on the floor is usually recommended. And then you can close your eyes, or you can lower your eyelids to have a soft gaze down in front of you, if that's more comfortable. And then simply just breathe and follow your breath. So you're following the breath, moving at its natural pace, not controlling it at this point, just following the movement of the in-breath and the out-breath. And I'll invite you to tune into breath-related sensations. So these may be the coolness of the air going in, and maybe it's a little warmer coming back out of the nostrils, or the sensation of your lungs filling up your chest, that sense of rising as you breathe in and settling as you breathe out. And you may also notice it down at the belly, slight stretching and moving in and out of the belly as you breathe in and out. I'd like you to choose one area of the body where you feel the breath-related sensations and choose that spot where you feel it most directly. And focus on that for the rest of this practice. And we're going to direct our attentional focus here, just like a flashlight with a strong, bright beam. So as you continue to breathe, imagine you're shining this flashlight on that one spot where you feel the breath most directly. Do this for a few cycles of breathing. And then just simply notice whenever your flashlight has moved, and then move it right back to that spot. Okay, because things are going to pull our attention. Thoughts come up, things that you've got to do, things that happened this morning, things that you're planning for later, things going on in the body, emotions are going to pop up. These all are going to pull that flashlight away from the focus on the breath. And that's okay, because that's what happens. The real work of the exercise, after you've chosen that target for the flashlight, is to pay attention to what happens. Notice when thoughts or sensations arise that pull your flashlight off target. Could be a sudden reminder there's something you need to do. It might be a memory floating up. It might be an itch. When you notice that your flashlight has been pulled away, redirect it back to the breath. Nothing special to do other than this simple gentle nudge that acts supportively to move the flashlight back. Let's just do this for a few more cycles of our breathing. I'll be quiet for a few moments. Now, the next thing we do before we actually close, I just wanted to introduce you to this as well, is to count your breaths. So you can do one on the in breath and the out breath. So one full breath is one, and then two in and out, three in and out. And do that on your own and see how far you get. If your mind got pulled away before you got to 10, that's really not unusual. When your mind gets pulled away and you're counting, just resume the counting. Again, it's just redirecting yourself back to paying attention to your breathing. And finally, the last step that we'll use is that mental noting. So you can just use simply the words in on each in breath and out on the out breath. Or if you prefer, you can use words like calm on the in breath, ease on the out breath. Just pick two words and just do that as you breathe in and out. That can sometimes help us to keep that flashlight there, to keep your attention focused. If you get distracted, you just come back to labeling and noting the in and the out breath. And that's it. That's the practice. So you can feel free to open your eyes. We'll finish. You want to take one last nice deep breath. You want to feel your body in the chair, kind of reconnect with your surroundings. Like we did last week, you might want to stretch a little bit, move a little bit after we do the practice. And feel free to let me know what that was like. If you want to put a note in the chat feature, I'd love to hear what that exercise was like. But that's part of what I'd encourage you to do during the week, is to try this flashlight or counting. You don't really need to listen to a meditation, although I'll show you where you can hear a guided practice. But you could just do this on your own, just even if it's for a few minutes. And every time you do that, it's like strengthening the muscle of that attention system and increasing that feeling of focus. Now, just so you know, another way that she thinks about it, Dr. Jha, is the floodlight of attention. This is a little bit different. This is kind of keeping ourselves open and alert. So think of like when you're maybe driving and you see a flashing yellow light, okay, and your attention is open like a floodlight. We're sort of keeping ourselves aware of the big picture, what could come into, and then we use the flashlight, but what could come into that whole field of awareness, right? It's more of a broad, open, receptive kind of awareness. So this can be done in the body scan. You notice a few comments here. Let me just, you can all see these. Great, feels refreshing, relaxing, more difficult than I thought it would be. Thank you for that comment. It can be difficult. And that's really what this is about, is that we're training our attention. And our attention is scattered, and we do get pulled in so many directions. So I encourage you to try this practice. Now, the body scan, which we don't have time for today, but the body scan is like using the floodlight attention. So the body scan is simply keeping your focus, your attentional focus on different parts of the body. Now, I'll again show you if you want to try this. We have some guided meditations on our website that you can follow. The body scan is maybe starting at the top of the head, and then you just bring your attentional awareness to each part of the body, going right down from head to toe, and you just note that. And of course, your attention is going to wander, but then you keep your attention wide open, especially when you get to the end. You might feel the whole body sitting and breathing. It's more of an open, receptive floodlight kind of state of awareness. Some people find that very nice and relaxing. Then there's the juggler that she talks about. The juggler is really kind of the executive functioning, the overseeing of all that's going on. And in some ways, it's very difficult because we're trying to keep all the balls in the air, right? Problem is that somebody throws another ball at us. And maybe another ball in the orbit of our juggling drops. And so we have to pick that up. We're trying to keep all these things going. And it's like, multitasking. And that's where we get into trouble, because with multitasking, what we're really doing is we're really changing our focus from one thing to the next. And if you're doing that all day long, that's very tiring. It's exhausting emotionally and physically, and it's very draining on the brain. So it is part of what we have to do, especially with complex things that we're doing in our jobs and in our life, even our home life. We're trying to keep it all together, right? Now, meditation practice and all this is another way to kind of help this be able to focus on what we need to focus on in the moment, but also keep all the balls up in the air. However, what we have is kryptonite. So if you remember Superman, kryptonite is the thing that kind of takes away his powers. And in this case, stress, poor mood, and threat are things that erode our attentional focus. And, for most of us, we're under a lot of stress. So think about it. Just think about maybe a simple stressful event that you're dealing with right now. It becomes like a vicious cycle. The worse, the more stress that there is, the worse our attention gets, because we can be fragmented and disconnected, and the less able we are to control it, that our focus and our attention. And the worse, then we feel more out of control, and our stress gets worse. So it's really that kind of vicious cycle. Poor mood and threat, same kinds of things. And again, mindfulness meditation can help us with all of these when you start getting to different levels of meditation. And not that it's more difficult, but then you can start focusing in on things like de-stressing. And next week's class actually is all about that. So I hope you tune in for next week's class. We'll talk a lot more about that. One of the things that's kind of nice about this is all these practices help us remember better. Because what's going on is that when we're focusing and we're trying to retain information, and we're trying to, enhance and boost our memories, especially for more complex skills, is that we're putting them on what's sometimes called the whiteboard. It's a temporary spot where our short-term memories are placed. And if our whiteboard is full, because it does have a limited capacity, if it's full of so many things, then it's harder to retain that. And it's harder to then store those memories into the long-term memory part of our brain. Simple way of saying it. This is all kind of part of her research. That's that working memory, which is a great tool for enhancing our memory, but it is vulnerable. And those stress and poor mood and threats are ways that it's vulnerable. So just to keep in mind that this is a great way to kind of remember things more effectively. But another thing that gets in the way is our own minds, our own thought processes, right? So even in this cute little cartoon where somebody's sitting there trying to meditate, there are all sorts of thoughts going on. And remember, in meditation, we can't get rid of thoughts. We're not trying to do that, but we are trying to manage them a little bit better. They did this study in Harvard, and they found that 47% of the time, we're not focused on what we're doing. Think about that. Almost half the time, while we're doing something, our minds are elsewhere. So it's kind of a natural thing That's an average, so it's not all the time, but it is an average. The other thing that they found in the study is that when our mind is wandering and not focused on what we're doing, our minds tend to wander. That's our default mode. They tend to wander to things that aren't going well in our lives. Okay. And it's sort of this next cartoon, which I know I showed you last time. But this is what happens when our minds are on autopilot. They tend to get full of all the things that we're concerned about, all those stressors, all the things in our life that are not going so well. And so these practices help us kind of clear that out a little bit. You might have heard of Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Zen master. He recently died in the past, I think, year or so, but a wonderful Zen instructor, very, very much revered by the mindfulness community and especially the Zen Buddhist community. But he says that the mind is like a television set with hundreds of channels. And so, which channel will you turn on? Usually, we're so focused on the drama, the story that's being told, that we don't notice that there's this consciousness, this awareness behind it all that we have, that we all have, that's receiving all that. So through mindfulness, we learn to recognize what channel is playing, and we can learn to change the channel, the stories, and the states, and recognizing that all of these states are simply appearances in our consciousness. So we learn to be more aware of them. We learn to change the channel. We learn to know what thoughts are helpful. And when we get into this state here, where the guy along the walk and his mind is full, we can learn to maybe take that simple focus practice or relaxing practice. And we're going to, in a minute, we'll do a practice about thoughts. And we try to get to a point where we're a little bit more clear in our thinking, where we can let go of some of the unhelpful thoughts in the moment. Hope that makes sense. All right, so I'm going to pause here before we do our next practice and just see any questions or thoughts about some of the things that I'm talking about. Feel free to put that into the chat. Okay, so for our last practice today, we're going to do something called the River of Thoughts. And this is also from Dr. Amishi Jha's book, which is a great book, by the way. It's an easy read, very practical tools, a lot of what I'm presenting, but you're going to get much more in depth if you decide to get the book. So this is the River of Thoughts meditation. So we'll start again with our usual position like we did before in the body, trying to find that place of being comfortable and relaxed, but also alert and attentive. So take a moment to get into that position. And again, you can close the eyes, or if you'd rather, keep them open, but keep them focused down in front of you so that you can turn inward. And so gathering our attention, we can use the flashlight image to help us focus. So let's just feel our breath blowing in and out, using the flashlight, aiming it at that one specific spot. And if you feel yourself getting drawn away, if your flashlight gets pulled to some other object, that's fine. Don't fret. Think that there's something wrong. Just redirect your flashlight back to that specific spot that you're focusing on. So do this on your own for a bit, reestablishing that flashlight practice. Now, I'll invite you to broaden your awareness so you're not selecting any target object. Instead, use the metaphor of your mind being like a river. You're standing on the riverbank, watching the water flow by. Imagine your thoughts and memories and sensations and emotions, whatever arises, as if they're flowing past you on the river. And just begin to notice what appears there, but don't engage with it. Don't fish it up. Don't chase it down the river or elaborate on it, get caught up in the story. Just let it float by. And just see if you can notice what's going on in the mind and in your emotional state, in this river. Your job right now is not to be making distinctions between which content is useful or relevant. And your mind even just might be wandering. That's fine too. You're not even going to try to stop the mind from wandering. The river will keep flowing, and there isn't anything you can or need to do about that. This is the key to open monitoring. You allow your mind to do what it will. Your job is simply to observe that flow at a distance, without engagement or direct participation. So we're not trying to fix anything. We're not trying to problem solve or analyze. That's often what our mind tries to do, right? We're just trying to step back just a little bit from the river and watch it all flow by. See if you can do that for a bit. And sometimes we find it hard. Sometimes we do get caught up in the currents, so to speak, in the stories of all those thoughts and emotions and body sensations that are flowing on by. So if you're having difficulty letting things pass, come back to your breath. Imagine your breath as a boulder in the middle of all that flowing water. Rest your attention on that stable, steady object. That's our breath, our breathing. And when you feel ready, you can broaden your attention again and go back to the open monitoring. Let's try that again. And if you get kind of caught up in the waters and you find yourself downstream a bit, just simply grab onto the boulder, feel your breath, stabilize your attention, and then open up again. So let's go back to the flashlight, or if you prefer, to the counting or the mental noting before we finish. Let's go back to feeling the breath, paying attention to each in-breath and out-breath. This is a good core practice to do. Again, using the flashlight or the counting, whichever you prefer, or the mental noting. Stabilize our attention and our focus. Let go of the image of the river and just feel the breath. Now, another way to do that is to feel your body. So you can sense into the body sitting here. You can be aware of your feet on the floor. You can be aware of the body being supported by the chair. You can feel all those touch points. So that's another way to get out of the head into the body, is just feel the body, feel the sensations of your body sitting. Or you could do it if you're standing as well, or even laying down. Either any position is fine, but sense into the body. It's another great anchor, as we talked about last week. When you're ready, we'll come to a close with this practice. You can begin to slowly open your eyes. They've been closed. Reconnect with your surroundings. And just before we move on, just kind of notice what this all feels like. These practices. What does it feel like to you right now? There's no right or wrong. Just notice for yourself. Sometimes it changes the state or quality of our awareness. Sometimes it doesn't, but just notice what it was like. And I'd love to hear from you. If you want to put into the chat what some of your reactions to that exercise was, some comments that you might have. I'd love to hear how your experience was. So next, we'll just kind of this point here, this quote by William James: "The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another." So we're really going to be diving into this more next week as we talk about stress. Stress, of course, is greatly linked with our thoughts. And so this today, as we realize that thoughts are one of the things that pull our focus, and that we can begin to control that thought process. We can begin to choose which thoughts we want to focus on. And then we can use that with the whole idea of managing our stress. All right, a couple more comments here. Thank you. Feel free for others to add some comments in. Extremely relaxing and refreshing at the same time. Good. Calming and relaxing. Great. Thanks for those comments. If others want to put in your thoughts or even questions, if you have a question about that, I'd certainly like to address that for you. These are all ways of taking care of that mind wandering and that distractions that come up and all the things that pull our attention. So good, letting go of the thoughts. Yep, that's a good practice, so we can realize that we don't have to follow all those thoughts. Thoughts are just simply mental events that come and go, like everything else in our experience. They're just like sounds, really. When you think about it, sounds come and go. Same thing with our thoughts. Like this comment, it relaxes your mind and spirit. Very good. Excellent. Another comment here. You have a nice, thank you. Nice calming voice. I almost went to sleep. So I'm glad you brought that up. So we talked last week about relaxing, and this all can be very relaxing to the point of sleepiness. And that happens, especially about this time of day. If you're closing your eyes, sometimes it sends a signal to the body to kind of really rest. And if you haven't gotten enough sleep the night before, it's easy to get to that kind of sleepy, dreamy state. That might just mean that you're letting go, and that's fine, because you're letting go of all the stuff that's swirling around up there. But it might just mean that you need a little sleep. So a couple ways to combat that are to sit up straight in your chair, to not let your body rest completely. So sit up a little bit and keep your eyes open. So keeping your eyes open is another way to, but again, with that sort of unfocused, soft gaze, but that's another way to stay away from the sleepiness. But having said that, it's okay if you did fall asleep. Nothing wrong with that. That happens. It's to the best of us. And so it is relaxing. And that's kind of what obviously what we talked about last time. But just want to make this point too, that sometimes we might consider thinking as an adversary, sort of an unwanted interruption to a good meditation. But this is really a misunderstanding. Thinking is natural. Our minds secrete thoughts much like our body secretes enzymes. Just what our mind does. It's a natural process. Thoughts are essential for us to communicate, to do our work, to design things, to analyze, to problem solve, or all sorts of creative endeavors, right? But in mindfulness training, we're not trying to stop thinking. We're trying to cultivate a wise relationship to thought. Kind of what this quote says. We're trying to get a wise relationship to thought so that we begin to realize those repetitive thought patterns. And again, we'll talk more about this next week. Sometimes we call them sticky thought patterns. There's conditioned patterns that automatically surface, especially when we're under stress. So, as Mark Twain put it, my life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened. They're all up in the mind. So anyway, that's a little bit about thinking and mindfulness. So let's move on. So this is what I would hope that you would try during the next week. So try some practice every day if possible. If that's hard, I know it's hard to kind of do this on a daily basis, but that's like anything, any sort of health and wellness activity, like going to the gym or eating better. We need to practice it. We need to get better at it, right? So at least try a minimum of 3 minutes. If you can do the 12 minutes, as I said before, that's optimal. And I'll show you a few ways where you can find some of these exercises. But even on your own, if you just want to try the flashlight practice or the refocusing, that's a great way to strengthen the muscle of attention. So practice when you can. Another simple practice is to just notice, where's your attention randomly? So ask yourself that question throughout the day. You might set a reminder. That's what I have on my phone. Just pops up occasionally and kind of go, okay, where is my mind right now? Like we did at the beginning. What's going on? Am I completely lost in thought, or am I aware of what's here right in front of me? One way to do that is to notice your senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you smell? What do you taste? Even your internal sense, what's going on inside the body. Those are great ways to kind of ground yourself and refocus your attention. And then finally, to pay attention to routine tasks, whatever it is. I listed a couple here, but just notice when you're doing that, when your mind wanders, and bring it back. Because your mind is going to wander. It's going to want to try to problem solve. It's going to work on the things that you're focusing on during the day. So even when you're doing routine tasks, we have this natural tendency to kind of multitask. So what I'd like you to try is just single task. Focus on that activity, like washing your hands while you're doing it. And again, use the senses to stay focused and grounded. Another great way to kind of keep this going. So again, we have our phone meditations, just a reminder about that. I would love to have you join. I do most of these. A colleague of mine helps with them on Fridays, but so 5 days a week we do these. You just call in. They last about 10 minutes. You can also call that the blue box here, the 688-6185. There's 3 pre-recorded numbers. Again, we have an app that you can sign up for on our EFR website. That's this address here. Okay, and I am going to post these slides on, I'll show you where, on Thrive. But I'm going to post these so you have all those links and so forth. They have 2 on-demand courses. One I mentioned last week, all about relaxing. And then the second one is called Bringing Calm and Focus to Overwhelming Situations. That's just a 1-session on-demand class. Now, this is the same website. When you go to the Carillon Wellbeing, the homepage, you'll see a number of different things on the homepage, but this particular link will take you to the guided meditation page. And the flashlight practice is there, the river of thought meditation is there, and a whole lot of other ones too. So you might want to give those a try. And then there's also other apps. 2 free apps, which I think are fantastic, are Insight Timer and Healthy Minds. 10% Happier is one of my favorites, although there is I think it's a yearly charge or a monthly charge for that, but excellent. Some great content on that. And then all this stuff I have posted on YouTube. So we now have lots of different playlists. So, check that out if you want to see some different practices and some more very targeted kinds of meditation and other classwork that I put up there. Just a reminder about the program itself. 4 basic services we provide: work-life resources, counseling, legal and financial, and then that site again has lots and lots of great information. So this is the Thrive. So if you don't know where to find that, you go to on the intranet to departments and communities, go to T, you'll see Thrive, and that'll pull up this Cloverleaf thing. You'll see right there, it says live and recorded resources. So that is where I'm going to post the recording as well as the slides. So if you wanted to go back or somebody else wants to see them, you can direct them to that spot. And so with that, I'll say thank you very much for your attention and focus. Hope you're able to get something out of that and find some ways to increase your ability to improve your attention and come back from distraction. Because for me, I think that's one of the biggest things. We do have so many ways that we get pulled into so many different directions. And when we practice this, it helps us refocus. So again, hope you find that helpful. I'm going to stop the, thanks for all the thank yous. Appreciate that. All right, going to stop the recording and I'll be on for a few moments if anybody does have any questions. Thanks for coming. Have a great rest of your day and hope to see you next week.